Well, good morning again, everyone. My name is Caitlin Wilson. I am a lifelong resident of the Cooley region. I have been married to my husband, Eric, for nearly 10 years. We have 2 children that have taught me so much about my journey in the world. I am the Director of Communications at Marine Credit Union, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you today. I'm so excited to talk to you today about my topic, which is servant leadership and the inward journey. I did a literature review. So the inspiration for this study, the topic of this research, started really rewinding about 5 years ago. I was coming out of the fog of early motherhood and really struggling to understand who I was. I ended up joining a band, which in and of itself was great, but put me into situations where my alcohol use started to spiral out of control. My marriage started crumbling, and I found myself in a divorce attorney's office. Since that time, 5 years ago, it's been a long journey of healing. I found myself in the servant leadership program a couple years into that journey of healing. And through the personal transformation that I've gone through over the past 5 years, continued throughout this program, was the reason that I chose the topic of servant leadership in the inward journey. Additionally, I found after I chose this topic that the final essay in Robert Greenleaf, the father and founder of servant leadership theory, the final essay in his book, Servant Leadership, A Journey into the Nature of Legitimate Power and Greatness, is in fact titled The Inward Journey, an Inward Journey. So this is Greenleaf's spiritual reflection on Robert Frost's poem, Directive. As we go through this presentation today, I want you to question for yourself, where am I on my inward journey? I will present my research and many authors' writings, my findings from them to you, but this today is ultimately about you. Successful servant leaders understand their journeys so they can accompany others. So the purpose of the research, again, using the primary theory of servant leadership, I reviewed more than 30 books, peer-reviewed articles on topics from personal and organizational psychology to theology, philosophy, and wisdom texts. And through this review, I was focused on 2 primary questions. 1, what is the concept of the inward journey, and are there common elements? And number 2, what is the connection between servant leadership and the inward journey that so led Greenleaf to pen his penultimate essay? Findings. So first, on the first topic of the inward journey, the first finding here was that these journeys are deeply personal. And so backing up a second, so for a definition, you can see on the screen, I found that the inward journey is the change of our inner life over time, the growth of our consciousness, heart, or soul. So Greenleaf specifically in his essay defines it as our continually evolving awareness. The 3 core elements I found, number 1, is that these journeys are deeply personal. There are no maps or universal answers that apply to all of us, only common elements and phases which we can share with one another, and we should share. However, the best teacher is within. Secondly, these journeys often take a circular shape. In Bruce Feiler's Life is in the Transitions book, published in 2020, he talks about how the linear life is dead. So very much these journeys that we travel are much more like a labyrinth where we reach dead ends or dark corners and have to turn around. We flow through stages until we learn what it is we are meant to learn. And then the final common element I found, ultimately in this journey, we are moving from self to service. This is the general arc of the journey, moving from self-interest to outward connectedness, and with some common mile markers along the way. So those common markers that I found through the research I've outlined here, I'll just touch on each one. The first is a stage that I called the Egoic Fog. In this phase, we are largely focused on self-preservation, safety and success, those base, kind of more base Maslow hierarchy of needs, the instinctual needs. Often in this stage, it is described as feeling out of touch with earth and self. Parker Palmer writes of living the divided life. So this is kind of all encompassed in that stage. Another common phase or stage is yearning and epiphany. So in Viktor Frankl's 1957 book, Man's Search for Meaning, he speaks all about this and dedicated his life to speaking of the power of meaning. So we may feel that something is off. We begin to yearn for something that worldly pursuits have not fulfilled. We question our purpose and sense a call to evolve. Commitment to the call is another key phase that I found. Having acknowledged our yearning and letting our heart pursue the questions, we choose to follow them, knowing that we will make sacrifices and change. So Susan Blackie, a feminist author, wrote a book in 2017 called If Women Rose Rooted. And she talks about this commitment to the call as a key turning point within life. Darkness and loss is another phase. So this may be intentional. So after committing to that call and committing to change, we may see these intentional losses as leaving a job, a relationship that is no longer serving us, a belief or ideal. These losses in periods of darkness may also be unintentional, losing a loved one, losing a relationship, the decline of our health. These painful losses, whether intentional or unintentional, often spin us into solitude or self-reflection. Rebirth and service. So having spent time in the darkness, in this phase, we can see us moving back outward with a new sense of self, our purpose, often emerging with gifts that we are ready to give the world. We seek ways to serve others over serving our ego. And then the final phase that I found is connectedness. So Robert Frost's poem concludes with a line on drinking from the spring, the cold, lofty water. So in this phase, often are reported feelings of deep kinship with other humans and the earth. We may experience spiritual transcendence, or you may see humans committing their lives fully to service or community, highly devout lives of spirituality and religion. So I'm just going to pause here for a couple seconds just to reflect on where you may be on your inward journey. And wherever that is, it's exactly where you should be. Secondly, the findings on the connection to servant leadership. So first, the journey leads to servant leadership, as I just traced. It's a move from self to service. These are the stages of rebirth, service, and connectedness. Second finding, outer change starts with inner change. So I studied and have studied change management theories from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to the collective impact model, Theory U by Otto Scharmer. And in all of these models, it is found that lasting collective change is achieved through the transformation of individual hearts and minds. Gandhi's famous line, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Outer change within organizations, within communities, starts inside. And then final finding here, the leader as inward journey guide. So servant leaders are uniquely equipped, as we're seeing and hearing today, with the skills and knowledge to effectively support others' inward journeys. Robert Greenleaf speaks of the traits of servant leaders as awareness, listening, healing, foresight, and intuition. And these are a skill set that uniquely equip servant leaders to serve as guides to others. So my personal analysis, as we look around at the world that we're living in, a period of pandemic, separation, isolation, and darkness, now's the time to talk about these inward journeys, if more so than ever before. These journeys influence every factor of our outward circumstances, and yet we often traverse them in darkness, alone. Servant leaders uniquely aren't afraid of that darkness. As Tom said, they're not soft, they're tough. They're not afraid of the brokenness and the discomfort. We will walk alongside others. We must speak of these journeys to restore wholeness in ourselves and in the world, that wholeness that starts from within. And finally, to create communities of people helping one another, we must have awareness of these journeys, awareness of their importance, and we need organizations and systems that support them. We need cultures, we need businesses and servant leaders who will speak of the sacred inward journey. So a couple of points in conclusion. David Brooks calls the inward journey the central journey of our modern life. And if we step back before the previous 2,000 years of modern Western history, it's what Jesus, the Buddha, and other teachers and servants who have walked the path before us have modeled. We can learn and we must share our journeys with others. We need to lift one another up because taking the journey alone is hard. I outline a few areas here for future research. Inward journeys specifically, and the role of work and the evolving meaning of work. Strategies for journey accompaniment. So servant leadership theory is one and is filled with strategies that we've all learned, but going more in depth on different areas there. I did find a gap in my research on the number of authors and studies that were penned by females or underrepresented populations. So this is certainly an area to investigate to see if there are other common areas of the inward journey that apply to underrepresented populations. And then final area for future research would be neuroscience and the inward journey, actually tracing the changes in the brain across stages. So my personal reflection, it's been a wild ride. Just asked my husband. I started in this program seeking a way to fix culture where I worked. And so with a very outward focus, and I found that I was turning back inward for additional healing that I needed to do. I'm leaving this program with significant personal and spiritual growth, as Vance talked and others have talked about as well today, and a personal wholeness that I didn't have when I started. On that point, again, the best thing companies and leaders can do, empower cultures where people can take these journeys. Thank you real quick to my own circle of trust as you read this this quote from Parker Palmer, excuse me. My own circle of trust. Thank you so much, Tom, for the that culture supporting my inward journey that you created. To Rick, thank you so much. To Enoch, to my own personal journey guide along this way, Lori Jane Carlson, my classmate, to Shar Peterson, my dear friend, all of my classmates on this call, to the support of my family, many of whom are on today, my grandma, my mom, my dad, my siblings, my two wonderful children, and most of all, my soulmate, Eric. So finally, I leave you with this as I have the copy of Robert Frost's directive up. Where are you on your journey? Think back over the stages. And more importantly, where do you want to be? Because at the end of life, on our deathbed, who do you want around you? And what do you want to feel? The next step of your journey is today. Thank you.